My name is Ariana. I've been married to Hudson for more than 17 years. We live in a cozy apartment thanks to the real estate firm where I work as an appraiser. Our son, Van, has already graduated from university and moved out. That left Hudson and me alone. Hudson, who worked at EMP, had a regular office job for many years. Our relationship was quite stable, however. Lately, his constant criticism of my actions became more frequent and difficult to bear. Despite this, I hoped it was just a temporary phase, especially because my 52nd birthday was approaching. We planned a celebration with friends and family, thinking that maybe this could help us reconnect. We booked a beautiful restaurant, sent out invitations, and prepared for a perfect evening. On the day of the event, the guests began to arrive. I greeted them with enthusiasm, but I couldn't ignore a nagging feeling, as if something was wrong. I felt it especially when I noticed that my parents were arriving unusually late. In the middle of the party, I stepped away to call my mom. "Where are you? The party has already started." I tried to sound calm, although the worry was evident in my voice. There was a pause, and then my mom answered me coldly. "Ariana, Kareem, I'm so sorry. Your father passed away this morning." I was speechless, filled with surprise and disbelief. "No, that can't be true," I managed to say, but the pain in my mom's voice confirmed the reality. She had planned to tell me the next day so as not to ruin my celebration. I returned to the party, trying to maintain my composure. Hudson noticed my distress and immediately asked me what was wrong. Through tears, I told him what had happened with my dad. His response was surprising. "That's terrible, Ariana. But we can't cancel the party now. Everything is already paid for, and it wouldn't be fair to our guests." I was stunned by his insensitivity, unable to understand his lack of empathy. Without thinking much about it, I announced to everyone, "I have to leave to be with my mom, but please stay and enjoy the celebration." As I headed for the door, Hudson called out to me, "You're being dramatic. You can visit your mom tomorrow." Angry and heartbroken by his reaction, I left him there without a word as I stepped into the fresh night air. When I arrived at my childhood home, I found my mom in the dark, hugging one of my dad's sweaters. Her eyes, red and swollen from crying, met mine. We hugged tightly, the pain we shared was palpable. Sitting together in that silent and barely lit room, I realized that my life had changed forever. Not only because of my dad's death but because I had seen my husband's true nature on a day that, in theory, should have brought us closer. On the day of the funeral, I was by my mom's side, receiving condolences. Van was next to me, offering his silent strength as we faced this deep loss together. As I looked around during the gathering after the service, I understood the importance of the bonds that truly matter. I noticed something that I couldn't ignore: Hudson and his family's obvious absence. That absence felt like an absolute betrayal. Later, when we returned to my mom's house, Van confronted me, confused and upset. "Mom, where are Dad, Grandma, and Grandpa?" I could only shake my head, feeling a mix of anger and disappointment. I responded, "I don't know, son. They didn't come." Van was visibly frustrated, and I couldn't blame him. That night, after the guests left and my mom fell asleep, I called Hudson, unable to hide my anger. "Where were you today?" I demanded an answer, and his excuse was that he and his parents had gotten sick from something they supposedly ate at the birthday dinner. The timing was too convenient, and I couldn't hide my skepticism. "All three of you couldn't come to my dad's funeral? Do you realize how that looks? How it feels?" His apology felt empty. I hung up the phone, too angry to continue the conversation. In the following weeks, my mom's health worsened, and she fell into a deep depression. I juggled work and her care while Hudson became increasingly distant and irritable. One night, when I tried to talk to him about the situation, he suggested, with a coldness that chilled me to the bone, that I consider putting her in a nursing home. I'm horrified. "No, she doesn't have much time left, and I want to be with her," I insisted. We had a heated argument until I proposed a solution that would change our lives, moving to my mom's larger and more comfortable house to take care of her. Hudson, disgusted by the idea, responded with disdain, "I'm not obligated to take care of a sick stranger." I couldn't believe he saw her as a mere inconvenience. The argument continued for days. But Hudson remained unmoved. It wasn't until I pointed out the financial benefits of moving, no housing or food expenses, that he grudgingly agreed. The day of the move was a mix of emotions. My mom's house was spacious and beautifully renovated. A stark contrast to our old apartment. Hudson seemed impressed by the property and commented on how beautiful it was, praising the effort my dad had put into it. Although his words were superficial, I decided to contain my more critical thoughts. At least for the moment. Hudson bragged to his colleagues about our new living arrangement, completely omitting the real reason for our move. However, over time, his dissatisfaction began to become evident. One night, while I was cooking, Hudson came into the kitchen and exploded, complaining about the pervasive smell of sickness. His harsh words were the last straw for me. I put down the knife I was holding and turned to face him. My patience, which had endured so much, finally ran out. As I prepared dinner, the smell of medicine and illness filled the house. A constant reminder of my mom's condition. Hudson's indifference was more evident each day. He avoided entering her room and complained every time he passed her door. Seeing my mother suffer, not only from her illness but also from Hudson's disdain, was heartbreaking. One quiet afternoon, Hudson and I were sitting in tense silence at the dining table when my mom gathered the strength to speak. "Ariana." "Hudson," she began, with a frail but firm voice. "I want to thank you both for taking care of me. I know it hasn't been easy." Hudson barely looked up, his eyes fixed on his plate. My mom continued. "I want to show you my gratitude." Those words made Hudson look up, now with a flicker of interest. My mom continued. "Hudson, I would like to give you the land on which this house is built. And Ariana, the house itself will be yours." I was stunned. "Mom, no, you don't have to do this," I replied, surprised and moved at the same time. I protested. But Hudson, visibly excited, couldn't hide his interest. My mom insisted on going ahead with her plans, adding that any remaining money would be for me. Hudson, unable to contain his enthusiasm, jumped up from his chair and went to get a bottle of wine. "Let's celebrate," he exclaimed as he poured himself a glass. In a low voice, he murmured, "Maybe the old woman will die sooner rather than later." His cruel words horrified me. "How dare you?" I said furiously, standing up so fast that my chair fell to the floor. "Heartless monster," I screamed. Hudson scoffed and, in a contemptuous tone, insinuated that my mom was practically dead, but that at least we could benefit from it. What followed was a fierce argument. Hudson insulted me mercilessly, and I responded with all the frustration and disappointment that I had kept inside for years. He finally stormed out of the house, declaring that he would stay with his parents. The days turned into weeks, and Hudson still didn't return. During that time, an urgent work trip came up that I couldn't refuse because it was crucial for my job, especially now that I was the only one taking care of my mom. The idea of leaving her alone was overwhelming, but I had no choice. I spoke to my mom about my dilemma, and with her typical selflessness, she suggested that I consider a temporary stay in palliative care. "It's just while you're away," she assured me. "Those places are comfortable, and I'll be well taken care of." Tears filled my eyes as I accepted the idea with a broken heart. But knowing it was the best option, we arranged everything for her admission to the hospice, and I prepared for my trip with a mix of relief and sadness. I didn't inform Hudson about the hospice or my travel plans. He was still with his parents, supposedly teaching me a lesson. The irony of his absence at such an important moment did not go unnoticed by me. The night before I left, I sent him a brief text message. "I'm going on a business trip. Please take care of the house." I hoped that this time would serve for him to reflect on his actions. But more than anything, I needed him to at least take care of the practical aspects of our shared life while I was away. I wasn't expecting a response from Hudson, and indeed, I didn't receive any. 5 days later, while I was on my trip, my phone rang unexpectedly. It was Hudson. I answered, and his tone was full of twisted delight. "Hi, Ariana. Guess what I've done?" My heart began to beat faster as he continued. "I've demolished your precious house." Watching the walls and roof fall was incredible. The collapse was spectacular. A chill ran through my entire body. What did you do? Why would you do something like that? I managed to say, with a broken voice. Hudson responded with unsettling glee. Because now you'll have to depend on me to build a new house on my land. That's right. Ariana. On my land. Remember. Your mom gave it to me. Now. You'll depend on me. As a good wife should. As the gravity of his actions settled in, hysterical laughter escaped me, filling the empty hotel room. Hudson seemed uncomfortable with my reaction. Why are you laughing? This is not funny. Ariana. When I finally regained my composure, my voice was calm but charged with determination. Oh, Hudson. You poor, foolish Hudson. Mom changed her mind at the last minute. She didn't trust you. Especially after seeing how you treated her. So, she changed the deeds. The house was yours. Or rather, it was. But the land is mine. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. After a few seconds, I heard his incredulous voice. You're lying. No, I'm not. I replied, feeling a wave of relief wash over me. Then I added firmly, Hudson, I want a divorce. I hung up the phone. My hands were shaking as I processed the reality of his betrayal. The need to end everything became as clear as the horror I felt at that moment. Hudson didn't know that my mom had moved to the hospice. He had been willing to demolish the house even with the possibility that she was inside. Upon returning from my trip, I immediately filed for divorce. Hudson fought bitterly, claiming rights to the land based on the initial verbal agreement with my mom. But I was prepared. I had the updated documentation showing the last-minute changes she had made. The legal battle was fierce. But in the end, justice prevailed. Keeping the land allowed me to leave Hudson with nothing more than the remnants of his own destructiveness. Throughout this terrible experience, my son Van was my greatest support. When he learned of his father's actions, his reaction was one of complete shock and repulsion. I can't believe what he did, he told me, clearly hurt. Finally, Van decided to cut ties with Hudson. His statement was firm, I don't want anything more to do with him. After finalizing the divorce and obtaining full ownership of the land, I decided to sell it. The profits allowed me to buy a modest apartment to start over. Meanwhile, my mom's health continued to deteriorate. I visited her every day at the hospice, treasuring every moment we spent together. She passed away peacefully with me by her side a few months later. Her funeral was small and private. Again, Hudson and his family were absent, which this time felt like a relief. In the weeks leading up to her death, while sorting through her belongings, I felt like something was missing. It wasn't until one night while browsing eBay that I discovered family items were being sold, Mom's antique vase, her cherished armchair, even the pearls that Dad had given her on their 27th anniversary. A feeling of rage washed over me as I realized that Hudson was behind it all. The next morning, driven by a mix of fury and determination, I drove to Hudson's parents' house. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles turned white. I was ready to confront him and reclaim what rightfully belonged to me as part of my inheritance. When I arrived at Hudson's parents' house and knocked, it was my former father-in-law who opened the door. I was surprised to see him so frail and pale. Are you okay? I asked, worried about his deteriorated appearance. He twisted his face in anger and responded abruptly. I'm perfectly healthy. Unlike your parents. His harsh words stung, and I responded more out of reflex than a genuine apology. I'm sorry, but my true purpose came to light as I continued to speak. I saw the items for sale online. I want them back. Hudson's mother appeared at the door, her expression one of feigned concern. Oh, dear Ariana, those things now belong to us. After all, the house was Hudson's. As my frustration mounted, that's not how it works. And I know those are my family heirlooms. I want them back now. They refused. And the ensuing argument became bitter and loud. Finally, they slammed the door in my face. But I was far from defeated. Determined. I went straight to the police station and filed a report. With the possibility of legal action, Hudson's parents reluctantly returned my mother's belongings, the jewelry, the furniture, everything. It had been 7 months since the dust of my divorce had settled, and all the terrible experiences with Hudson's family. I had slowly begun to find a new rhythm and heal from the wounds of betrayal. Then, unexpectedly, I received news that shattered my fragile peace. My former father-in-law had passed away from cancer, which was in its advanced and untreatable stages when it was diagnosed. Despite our strained relations, I felt a pang of sympathy. No one deserves to suffer like that. My empathy, however, was soon put to the test when I received a summons for the reading of his will. Hudson, his mother, and I were called to attend. The atmosphere was tense. Hudson avoided looking at me and treated me like a stranger, while his mother couldn't hide her disdain. "How dare you show your face here, you ungrateful home wrecker," she muttered as she sat down. I maintained my composure, and when Van offered his hand in silent support, the notary began to read the will, and its contents surprised everyone. My former father-in-law had left his house to me, while the land and money were the property of Hudson and his mother. Hudson and his mother erupted in anger. "This is outrageous," Hudson shouted. "Everything should have come to us. We are his real family." The notary adjusted his glasses and calmly declared, "The will is legally binding. Mr. Martio was of sound mind when he made these decisions. You will not be able to challenge them in court." As we left the office, I noticed Van deep in thought and unusually quiet. I gave him space, knowing he would speak when he was ready. 3 weeks later, I was enjoying a moment of peace in my apartment when my phone rang. It was my former mother-in-law, and her voice sounded panicked. "Ariana, you have to come quickly. Your son has gone crazy. He has hired a construction company," she told me. I rushed to the scene and found chaos. Heavy machinery was near the house, and the destruction had begun. Hudson and his mother were frantic, begging the workers to stop. When I approached, his expression was resolute but calm. "Mom, I know this might seem extreme," he began to explain to me, preparing to justify his drastic decision. Van looked at me with firm and clear resolution. "It's retribution for what they did to Grandma's house. To you. To us," he explained. I nodded, understanding the pain and rage that led him to make that decision. "I know, honey. I'm not here to stop you," I replied. He nodded to the foreman, and the noise of destruction filled the air. Hudson and his mother's screams were lost in the sounds of falling walls and shattered glass. As the house crumbled, my emotions were a storm. One part of me lamented the loss of what once was, memories of laughter and love that the house held. But another part of me felt a liberation, as if justice was being done. Weeks later, while I was enjoying a quiet afternoon, a knock interrupted my solitude. Upon opening the door, I found Hudson and his mother. Their appearance was disheveled and tired. "Ariana," Hudson began, his voice a mix of desperation and bitterness. "We need to talk. We have nowhere to go. We were hoping we could stay with you for a while." I was speechless. Stay with me? After everything they had done? He had always been so kind and responsible. But his mother intervened with pleading eyes. The audacity of their request left me breathless. These people who had caused me so much pain, who had disrespected my mother in her last days, were now seeking my charity. I responded firmly, "Absolutely not." Their faces fell. But I continued in a steady voice. "You forgot how you treated my mother, how you labeled her a burden, how you were ready to destroy her house while she could have been inside, just to spite me." They seemed ashamed. But beneath that, I sensed latent anger. "We made mistakes," Hudson admitted reluctantly. "Where are we supposed to go?" he added, taking a deep breath. I snapped. "That's not my problem anymore. You made your choices, and now you have to live with the consequences. Just like I had to." They left. Muttering quietly, after they left, I immediately blocked their numbers. I didn't want any more trouble from them, not even through mutual friends. Later, I learned that Hudson had sold the land where the demolished house once stood. With the money, he bought a small apartment in a rundown area of the city. He mentioned it to Van during one of our dinners. He snorted. "That's where they belong. A dilapidated apartment surrounded by decay. It's fitting." I nodded, feeling a complex mix of emotions. There was a pang of pity for Hudson and his mother, now reduced to such a state. But most of me remembered all the damage they had caused. The harsh words and cruel actions of the past months had transformed me. My career at the real estate company was thriving, and I had recently received a generous quarterly bonus. Being recognized for my hard work was rewarding, especially after such a tumultuous period. As I ran my hand over the smooth surface of my mother's old restored desk, I felt a connection to her. The familiar grain of the wood evoked memories of her sitting there, writing letters and managing her finances. It felt as if she were a part of me. She was still with me. I was rebuilding my life when my phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. It was when I heard his voice, full of excitement. As I answered, Van's voice was brimming with joy. "Mom, I have news," he announced enthusiastically. "What is it?" "Honey," I asked. Although I already had a hunch what he was going to say, I proposed to Melody, and she said yes. My heart overflowed with joy. Melody was a wonderful young woman, kind and intelligent, and she truly brought out the best in Van. "Oh, honey, that's wonderful news. I'm so happy for you both." We talked for a while about their plans for the future, and then Van's tone shifted to something more serious. "Mom, there's something else I want to talk to you about regarding the wedding. I've decided that I don't want to invite Dad or Grandma. After everything, I don't want them there on the happiest day of my life." I took a deep breath, understanding his decision. "It's completely your decision. Your wedding day should be a celebration of love and joy, surrounded by people who truly care about you and Melody. If that's what you feel is best for you, then I fully support you." After we hung up, my mind lingered on Hudson and his mother. I didn't actively seek information about them, but from time to time, snippets of their lives reached me. The last update was that Hudson was working 2 jobs to make ends meet and still living in that dilapidated apartment with his mother. She had tried to control me and break me, but instead, they found themselves struggling in the mess they had created. While I had emerged from that terrible experience stronger and more resilient, I picked up a framed photo of my parents from the recently restored side table. I looked at it and whispered, "I wish you could see this. Mom and Dad. I think you would be proud." Their memories and the values they instilled in me continued to guide me, reinforcing my determination to live a life full of integrity and love. Something that was a stark contrast to the bitterness and regret that Hudson and his mother seemed to feel. My parents' days were a beacon on my journey, and I felt their silent approval in my heart as I navigated this new chapter of my life.